Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to our regular scheduled July board meeting of the Clay County Board of Education. Thank everybody for coming out and everybody for tuning in that's out there in the world of Facebook still watching us live. So we'll go ahead and get everything started this evening. Board, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as you have in front of you and as it was emailed to you.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. Mr. Jones, second. All in favor?
Aye.
And just a couple of announcements real quick. We do have a special session August 11th for personnel, and then our next regular board meeting will be the fourth Monday in August, which is August the 23rd. So, and then at this time we're going to do a couple of recognitions. We have Mr. Overland, who's the high school principal.
Don't be shy. Good evening, everybody. I have three fantastic graduates. I'm used to saying students at Hayesville High School, but these are now graduates of Hayesville High School. And we have some recognitions that we'd like to give them for their sporting activities this spring. First is Allison Thomas. Allison she was named to the 2021 All Smoky Mountains Conference team for ladies soccer. So we're really proud of Allison. Allison, what are your plans after high school? Tell everybody.
I'm going to Princeton University, and I'm going to study mathematics and minor in teacher preparation and linguistics.
Wow. All right. Next we have Paul White. Paul is a 2021 graduate of Hayesville High School, and he was also the conference champion. He won the 400-meter dash, which if any of you have ever tried that, that's a tough race. I think I tried it once. Made it about 3/4 around the loop. But Paul won the conference championship in the 400-meter dash, and then at regionals he placed to move on to state. So he did represent Hayesville at the state track meet. Paul White. Paul, do you mind sharing what's next for you?
I'm going to Western Carolina University where I'm going to major in business.
All right, and next we have Ryland Snowden. And I haven't mentioned this, but Allison was a 4-year letter earner in soccer. Paul is a 4-year letter earner in track, is that right? And Ryland also in track. So that, these students really stayed with it their entire time and showed a lot of grit in completing this sport all 4 years. Ryland won the conference championship for the Smoky Mountain Conference in 2 events, the 300-meter hurdles and the high jump. And you competed in the high jump at state. Did you also do hurdles?
Yeah, I went to school.
All right, Ryland Snowden, everybody. Hey, Ryland, you want to tell everybody what you're up to now?
I'm going to be attending Lenore University for the 2021 class and further in track and field there.
You guys want to make a loop up and shake all the board members' hands on your way out? That'd be really nice. They want to tell you congratulations. And maybe take a photo also.
Please come back and teach.
Good job, guys. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Allison. Do you want to send the baseball team in there too?
Probably end up working at NASA instead.
She's a very talented artist too. Yes.
We're building some suspense right now while the baseball team begins to make their way in.
Okay.
Come on in, guys. Come on in. Come on in. Come all the way on. ladies and gentlemen. We're here now to honor our baseball team. These members of the baseball team had a great season. They were the Smoky Mountain Conference champions again and made it to the third round of the playoffs. And we were really proud of them. They opened our new stadium, which was fantastic to see. We weren't really sure until the end if we were going to get to do that this season, but we did. And these were the first players to play on that diamond. So they were a lot of fun to watch. Had a lot of come from behind wins this season and just showed a lot of determination. Coach Marty, would you mind coming up and maybe mention a couple of words and then say these fellas' names and I'll give them their certificate. This is Jeff Barlow, our head baseball coach.
Thank you for having us. We certainly appreciate it. It's been a great honor. Started coaching baseball in 1977, a long time ago. Gives you a little bit of idea how old I am. One of the things that I'm most proud of what we do as coaches in athletics is we teach young people how to deal with adversity. And this young group here, our seniors, through their 4 years here at Hayesville, they had to adjust and they had to overcome. And I'm just so proud of I can't tell you how proud I am of our 4 seniors. Clayton's not here tonight, but the other 3 are here, and I'd like to introduce you to them in a moment. But I want to thank the opportunity to coach. I want to thank the parents. I certainly want to thank the commissioners for building that wonderful baseball field. When I came here, I thought we had one of the most beautiful stadiums right here where the primary school is now. And I broke my heart when they had to mow it down, but they resurrected a stadium that is so beautiful, it's so wonderful, it's unbelievable, and the whole community truly needs to be proud of it. I said that the young men here overcome a lot of obstacles. First of all, one of our seniors, who would have been here this year, passed away a couple of years ago. It was really hard for us, but they persevered and they played and they honored him by playing and winning for him. That young man's name is Stephen Plummer. Then, of course, they lost their field and we had to go down to the middle school field and play. And they played hard and they won. Then we had the new field built and was building, and we got hit with COVID-19. Some of these seniors lost their junior year, but they stayed with it. They continued to work, persevered with the idea of success their senior year. Now I'd like to introduce you to these seniors. First of all, how can I forget Rico? Where's Rico? There he is. Rico, step forward. He's one of my assistant coaches, and Jeff Stewart, who's one of my other assistant coaches, and they pulled the wagon. They truly did. They pulled the wagon. Rico works with our pitchers, and Jeff works with our hitters, and throws BP every day, and we could not have done it without them. They were 2 wonderful gentlemen, and worked hard with these young men. Now our seniors, Connor Bradley this year, he was a senior. He was named the Smoky Mountain Outstanding Player of the Year. He was in the state top 5 batting. He's going to continue his baseball career at community college just out in Hickory. So he's going to make us and continue his baseball career. We have Eli Roberts. Where's Eli? He's right behind me. Great young man right here. He was a multiple athlete, a star. He ran cross country, went to the state cross country, played basketball, and was our squish knife in baseball. He played everywhere, all over the field, and we certainly could not have done it without Eli. Our other senior, Jeremy Stewart, was named the Pitcher of the Year in the Smoky Mountain Conference. Jeremy's going to continue his baseball career at Middle Georgia, and they're really looking forward to having him there. He had an outstanding year, made all conference, and as I said, was Pitcher of the Year. Also here we got Kate Denton. Kate's a sophomore. Did a great job. played third base for us, pitched a little bit, and of course he'll be back and really should be one of our leaders next year. We also had another sophomore, Avery Leatherwood, back here. I just found out today he hurt his shoulder at football practice, but he'll be back. Avery was our catcher, an all-conference performer, outstanding young man, solid. He didn't know he was going to catch this year when the season started. By goodness, he did a great job for us. We're proud of it. His running partner at first base, Kyle Lunsford. I saw him. I was so proud of him the other day. I was driving through town, and he's running. You don't know how hard it is to get this guy to run, and he's running. And I said, my goodness, what's going on? And I looked closely, and he had a little young girl running right with him. Kyle also made all-conference. Clayton, as I said, is a senior. He's not here with us tonight. Dakota Matheson's in Florida on vacation. Peyton Hunt. Only the good Lord knows where Peyton Hunt is right now. Peyton did a really good job for us. He also plays basketball. Mason Cook's out in Colorado on vacation. It must be nice. Or he would have been here. Braxton Cherry. Where's Braxton? Braxton was our starting left fielder this year. He had a little bit of an injury, and we had to put him on the shelf, but he's going to be fine next year, and we expect big things from Mr. Cherry next year. Wayne Barter is also a sophomore. He was one of our right-hand guys on the bench, and he kept us straight. Didn't he let us know when we forgot something or missed something, but he's on vacation also. But anyhow, I just want to thank you for your time. One thing I've learned in coaching all this time is that the most important thing that we can give, it's not money, it's our time. And these young men here use their time wisely, and you guys, I certainly am very proud of all of them. Thank you so very much.
Got it.
Congratulations, man. Good luck. Good work, man. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great seeing you. Good luck. All right. Hey, guys. Thank you for what y'all do. Appreciate it. Bye. You too. Thank you for what you do for us. Thank you, man. You know my son?
Who's that?
Brett.
So thank you for that. It's always nice to see our students getting recognized. So I appreciate you doing that. At this time, we'll do our public comment. We've had a few people that have signed up for public comment this evening. As always, just a reminder that that's limited to 3 minutes per person. There is one exception to that tonight, and that's Mr. Jim Johnson. He called ahead and asked to have a certain amount of time allotted to him of 10 minutes, and so we did grant that since he had called ahead. So we'll start with Miss Alice Moore as our first public speaker this evening.
Masks are something that I can assure you 100% of the kids in this school don't know. I felt like the mask held me back a lot of the time. I actually fell down the stairs once because I couldn't see under me. Eventually in the school year it got better and you can get used to it, but it still felt terrible to have to wear a mask all day. You can barely breathe in a mask and it can make it hard to talk sometimes. Of course I support kids my age getting the vaccine when it is safe. I may not believe in the masks, but I do believe in the vaccine. Those were just a couple of reasons I asked you to vote against wearing a mask this school year. Of course, if any kid, teacher, or aide wanted to wear a mask, or kid's parent wanted them to wear one they could. A common question that my mom kept bugging me about was what if someone gets COVID-19? My answer to that was if someone got COVID-19 or the new Delta variant, the school would go online for a week and then wear a mask for a week in the school. So with all that, my vote is for all children in the Hazel school system to not have to wear a mask.
Thank you, Ms. Alice. That was very nice. And next we have Ms. Karen Trapp.
I'm gonna have to help her here. You can stand up in the back. We could have maybe asked you to plug into this app, but we thought we would be after Jim's here presentation, just as a little follow-up, but my little iPad's tiny.
Miss Karen, if you could,
Oh,
stand
sure.
right up there.
Sure. Can you hear me a little better? First, I'm Karen Trout. I'm a small business owner here in Hayesville. I'm a retired teacher, and I have the privilege of mentoring and volunteering with community and schools. So we have had some concerns that, and I'm going to put this here so I can see it. Jim's presentation will really go in depth on this. Has anybody thought the world's gone crazy in the last year or so? It has gone nuts. We've got drag queens teaching and reading to elementary kids. And I'm going to quote from this website. It gives kids glamorous, positive, unabashedly queer role models. It concerns me. We have Dr. Seuss being censored because he may be offensive in some of the things that he depicted. That concerns me. We have transvestites in women's sports. This is a man in a woman's weightlifting competition representing the United States in the Olympics. It concerns me. We have to fund the police, which is crazy. What are they thinking? It concerns me. We have the Capitol being fenced and barbed wired so that Americans can't go into the Capitol. It concerns me. And yet we have free, open borders for people we don't even know who they are coming in. It concerns me. Antifa, I don't even know what to think. Our present administration don't even recognize that they exist. It concerns me. Black Lives Matter? Well, yes, of course Black Lives Matter. We all agree on this. But when you say all lives matter, we're racist. And that concerns me. Antifa, again, we don't even know where they're going, where they're headed, other than they're trying to destroy our principles and our values here in America. Pulling down statues. It began with Confederate soldiers and Confederate generals, and then it's gone to Abraham Lincoln. It's just concerns me. So the United States Department of Education, it's not been implemented, but for maybe a couple of decades, and it's selected by the president of who's going to be the secretary. Right now, it's Miguel Cardona, and he proposed a rule in April of this year prioritizing funding for American history and citizen science courses that involve the 1619 project. This Department of Education has received $122 billion from the COVID relief rescue funds. The secretary has recently refused in an interview to say how many genders he believes exist. That definitely concerns me. I'm just in bewilderment. The deputy secretary, Cindy Martin, she not only supports CRT, but she praised a speaker recently for her claim of spirit murder against black children in the public schools. And then she advocated for abolitionist teaching in the public schools. She also said that white teachers in public schools should undergo anti-racist therapy. So anyway, when I started working with Jim here on some of the things that were concerning me with the nation and what's going on, the critical race theory is becoming part of our curriculum through the Department of Education. So it's a Trojan horse because it speaks about nice things. And some of the buzzwords that none of us would disagree with would be freedom, equality. Their buzzwords include conflict, discrimination, freedom, oppression, minorities, marginalized, racism, inclusion, exceptionalism, gender, privileged, systemic affluence, intolerance, and xenophobia. The DEI, which is the acronym for diversity, which we would all think diversity is great, but in their verbiage, it means having more diverse representation of those that are oppressed. The equality is actually equity, which is equality of outcome, not opportunity.
For about 30 seconds.
And then inclusion is banning certain words like he or she because they could be offensive. So just in conclusion, I'm just a mom, I'm a volunteer, I'm a teacher, I'm a community person that just is really concerned about our kids, about America, and I just really want to pray about all of this. This is a fantastic school and a fantastic community. And I just want us to all be aware of what's happening so that it doesn't, like a snake, bite us on our ankles when we aren't aware of what's laying beneath us. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Sorry if I went over it. And I love Hayesville School. It's amazing. Thank you.
Mrs. Cat, were you going to speak to? You speaking? No. Okay. And then Paul Rose. I've got it. You got that. Either way. Okay.
Paul Rose, R-O-H-S. You say it right? Well, I'm a resident here, live in Chute Creek. I don't have blood kids in school, but because I'm a member of this community, all of our kids are in school, and we should all be concerned about all the kids as much as we are our own children. A long time ago, the education system started down the slippery slope of, instead of just teaching what kids need to learn, they teach it and leaving it to the facts, as in history, reading, writing, arithmetic. They also started teaching the why. What's behind the history? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? How is this way? And that goes into, opens the door to a teacher's individual opinion, where the school should be teaching facts. They get into a lot of opinion. And at the same time, parents have lent more of their teaching what kids should learn at home, either from the parents, from their relatives, from their churches, from their neighbors, from what they learn getting in fights with their friends. That's all stuff that the parents have through one fashion or another, lent to the school. So a lot more responsibility for those types of things is lying on the school system these days, instead of just the facts. teachings. Again, history is history. We all can, because that's all factual. It all happened. Why it happened is up to a personal opinion, and that's fertile ground for discussion. But that's where it should stop. There should be a discussion to hear everybody's opinions, because that's how we all learn what other people think, and allows us to put our own efforts into developing our own opinions instead of just citing what somebody else that we think knows what they're talking about. Regardless of who that is, that becomes that student's opinion without them having an opportunity to develop their own opinion based on their cultural background, what they learned in church, from their parents, from their family, which is how our country got to where we're the greatest country in the world. Another example of what, and as schools go to, maybe rote is the wrong word, rote teaching, where kids receive, teachers provide. It's a one-way street, and there's discussion. Another example that scares me a lot is the article I read a while back on the emoji-based survey that's going to be used to develop, to survey what kids think in the morning. Now, we all get surveyed. You can't stay in a hotel, you can't buy anything from Amazon, you can't rent a car, you can't buy a car without getting 9 surveys. And unless you all are different than I am, you look at the survey, if you have to move forward, you click all the numbers, you move forward. Kids in school, probably like myself, at some point are just going to say, dot, 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 I don't want to take the time, I got work to do. So I'm concerned about that eliminating yet another avenue of discussion between the student and an individual, whether it's a teacher, a mentor, one of the guidance counselors in school. The emoji-based thing is just one more, another degree warmer of the warm water in the bucket with the frog in it, and that just really concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Johnson, you're next.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Cole and the members of the board for allowing me to speak here tonight. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but for those of you who do not know me, my name is Jim Johnson. My wife and I, Mary Ann, who's also my best friend, and we've been married for 48 years, moved here to Clay County in 1997, where she opened a successful endodontic practice that actually interacted with Dr. Shook, and stayed in practice until 2016, when she had to close her practice because of medical issues. We love Clay County. It is our home. And we are concerned about the county, what happens here in the county, to include the students in the school. Just a little brief background on us. I'm a retired military officer. Mary Ann served 15 years in the Army as well, primarily as a dentist. We have 2 children and 7 grandchildren. The 2 grandchildren live in, the 7 grandchildren are in different places, but 3 of them are in high school in Virginia. One is a student at Eastern Carolina University, and 2 are currently serving in the Navy. So the reason I'm here this evening is to briefly discuss 3 areas of concern. First, the newly revised North Carolina K through 12 social studies and U.S. history standards. Second, the forthcoming curriculum still under development for these subjects and their implementation in Clay County schools. And third, the introduction of critical race theory, also known as CRT, into our school system. My intent tonight is not to present a point-by-point critique, a detailed critique of these items, but to make our concerns known so that should they arise in the future, the board will be able to take corrective action. I also ask for the board to review and hopefully approve the resolution to ensure to ensure dignity and non-discrimination in Clay County schools, modeled after a similar resolution signed by North Carolina Cabarrus County School Board. I respectfully ask that you hold all your questions until the completion of my remarks. My concerns surrounding the previously mentioned social studies and history standards are twofold. First, that they are poorly written and vague. According to the Fordham Institute, which is a conservative think tank, and this is a quote, North Carolina's new civics and history standards are inadequate. Nebulous and verbiage and aversion to specifics make them without content in many places. And organization is poor throughout. A complete revision is recommended prior to implementation. The Fordham Institute assigned the civics and government standards a D-, stating that most civics and government standards are too broad, vague, or poorly worded to provide useful guidance to educators, and the manner in which they are organized is unhelpful. Fordham also assigned North Carolina U.S. history standards an F, stating that the standards provide inadequate guidance for school districts and teachers due to a near total absence of specifics. Fordham graded these North Carolina standards as the worst in the Southeast. North Carolina Superintendent Catherine Truitt agreed with Fordham's assessment, stating that I feel like they are not grounded in discipline of history. They lack specificity. They are scattered organizationally. They lack historical content. My other concern regarding these standards is one shared by North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and other North Carolinians, who believe that the standards and curriculum may be used to present an overall one-sided negative view of American history that does not give credit to all the good and positive things that this nation has accomplished. Since the standards are vague and not well organized, this leaves a huge gap for those who wish to insert anti-American views, Marxist ideology, and critical race theory into their instruction. This leads into my second major concern, the development of curriculum. In addition to the items just mentioned, we are concerned that the curriculum developed by outside interest groups like the 1619 Project, which is a false history denounced by liberal and conservative historians alike, and Black Lives Matter will find their way into Clay County schools. As far-fetched as this may sound, these programs are already being taught in Forsyth and Wake counties, respectively. We also look forward to reviewing the state-provided curriculum later this year, and if necessary, providing input for an alternative curriculum that can augment the state-provided curriculum. Our third major concern is the inclusion of critical race theory, or CRT, into Clay County schools. We believe in and support the teachings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's dream that people should not be judged based upon the color of their skin, but upon the content of their character. Contrary to Reverend King's dream of colorblind society, one of the basic tenets of critical race theory is that the color of your skin does define who you are, not the content of your character. CRT is a worldview that looks at everything through the lens of race and racism. It believes that whites are inherently racist and that systematic racism is normal and pervasive in America and its institutional power structures. CRT believes that these power structures are based upon white privilege and white supremacy, which permeates the marginalized people of color. It believes that racism advances the interests of whites and that whites are incapable of righteous actions on race and only undo racism when it benefits them. Consequently, CRT divides America into two groups, the oppressor, who are whites, and the oppressed, which are blacks and other people of color. Included in this description of CRT are a number of quotes from Richard Delgado, considered by many to be the early father of CRT, and the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. We believe that CRT is Marxist, and we are concerned that it will be taught to students here in Clay County, not as a specific subject called CRT, but it will be interjected or woven into subjects like social studies, history, English, and others. Because these standards are so vague and open-ended, this type of indoctrination could easily take place in classrooms. It is quite possible that the introduction of CRT will come in the form of diversity and equity training and professional development through the teachers. and that direction comes from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and contract providers. Our hope is that the Clay County Board of Education and Administration will stand against these forms of racist, Marxist, and anti-American indoctrination. One final comment before moving on to the non-discrimination resolution. Marxism is alive and well in North Carolina education, public education. I know that's a bold statement to make, but I refer to the following article in which Mr. David Prophet, a Wake County high school teacher and the vice president of the North Carolina Association of Educators, is clearly identified as being affiliated with the Chinese communist group Open Roads, and I will leave a copy of this with you for your review. In closing, I want to draw the board's attention to the Cabarrus County resolution to ensure dignity and non-discrimination in schools. I will not read the entire resolution, but will skip to its conclusion, which reads, number one, that one race or sex is not inherently superior to another race or sex. 2, that an individual solely by virtue of his or her race is not inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. 3, that an individual should not be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partially because of his or her race or sex. 4, that an individual's moral character is not determined by his or her race or sex. 5, that no individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. 6, that no individual solely by virtue of his or her race or sex should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. 7, that the United States comprises persons that are all created equal. It is my hope that the board will review and then adopt this resolution for all Clay County schools. And I believe each member of the board does have a copy of that. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So this concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain them at this time.
Did you say that you had was an information about David Prophet?
Yes.
The other ones
I'm going to leave one copy with the board, but I have a couple more copies I can leave if you're interested. Yeah. Okay. If there's nothing else, again, I want to thank Mr. Cole and the board for allowing me to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and your thoughts, and most importantly, your concern about the kids of Clay County. It should always be our priority as a board, so taking care of our kids. So we appreciate all of your time. Next, we'll move into the reports section of our agenda. Mr. Cole.
Yes, and interestingly enough, the one report tonight was one that I had put together for the board related to the North Carolina New Social Studies Standards. And believe it or not, I had this done before Mr. Johnson contacted me, so it was not as a result. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion statewide, really nationwide, over this, and I just felt like it was important to kind of explain where we are on all of this to the best of my ability. So I provided this report to the board, and you have a copy of it. Just first of all, I can just say as a North Carolina citizen that I concur with all of the concerns that I've heard here tonight. But I have to remind everyone, and I've tried to communicate this as well as I can with the public, that state standards are state standards. And this Board of Education and myself, the only say we get is as North Carolina citizens by contacting our state representatives, which in this case would be Senator Corbin, Representative Gillespie, Governor Cooper, and State Superintendent Truitt. Those are our state level representatives that work on these standards. Just as a review, the old social studies standards were approved in 2010. We've been using those ever since. There is an entire policy at DPI with the State Board of Education that requires all subject standards to be reviewed on a regular basis. So actually these standards were supposed to have been implemented a year ago, But because of the current political environment, I think that there was a hyper amount of attention on this, and they decided to take an additional year. Some changes were made. There were 5 iterations of these social studies standards. There were 2 State Board of Education votes after some changes were made. And they were approved by the State Board of Education this spring. DPI also provides optional resources for teachers to use whenever they update standards. But Mr. Johnson, he mentioned state curriculum. And one thing I want to clear up is that the state does not provide a curriculum. Okay? Curriculum is a local board of education authority, along with the teachers and principals. Teachers develop curriculum and lesson plans. Principals review those. They are shared with the public for input and feedback, and they are presented to the board for approval. And that process takes time. Because these standards were not adopted by the state board until this spring, and because they didn't release the resource documents that are optional for our teachers to use until July, obviously we have not had time to even fully understand the standards at this point. And it would not be fair, in my opinion, to ask our teachers to move forward on these until they've had time to study them. And honestly, I think it's a positive to let things kind of shake out a little more at the state level, because I'm of the opinion that this is not over yet. And even though they've been adopted, the chairman of the State Board of Education said we are moving forward on the implementation process. How these are implemented and the curriculum that is written is up to this local Board of Education. With all of that said, that was just the first slide. The second one deals with, there is a crosswalk document that has been provided as part of these optional resources from NCDPI. And what this document does is it goes through the social studies standards from 2010 and compares them to the social studies standards of 2021 from kindergarten through 12th grade. Because of course in high school, you quit going by grade level and you start going by subject. So there's American history, there's civics, there's world history, but it allows you to kind of see, it pulls out in the crosswalk, what are the specific changes between the two? And I've provided that link on this slide. It's freely available, so you can go through and look. I shared this with Mr. Johnson, I believe, last week, so he could have a look at it as well. This just came out 2 weeks ago, so that is hot off the press. It's very useful if you're interested to see the differences between the old standards and the new standards. And certainly, it is a relatively complex document. If you would like to sit down with me or the principal of your school and have us kind of help you go through it, we're more than happy to do that. Because sometimes, you know, when things come through the state government, they can get a little more complicated than they need to be. But this one is a pretty good document, and I think it's pretty useful for someone that wants to look at the differences. To reiterate, the local Board of Education is responsible for approving curriculum to implement state standards. There are currently no textbooks or curriculum to buy to align to these standards. And I can assure you that the North Carolina state government is not going to provide curriculum, because that's not what they do. That is entirely up to us. More and more, you can see that textbook companies across the nation are building their curriculum and textbooks along national standards. And so when we have our state standards in North Carolina, many times it's hard to find a company that actually makes materials, particularly in high school subjects. So in general, our high school teachers create their own curriculum. And then they put that together with daily formative assessments, lesson plans, and then maybe a weekly assessment or test that's a little more summative, along with projects. And I'm sure that's going to be the case with the social studies standards moving forward. Our teachers and principals will build that over this fall and spring. That will be our next steps on our implementation plan in Clay County. We're going to continue to use the 2010 standards while our teachers study these new standards, and we kind of let things shake out at the state level and see what happens. But we will be prepared for next year to have a curriculum in place that has been created by our teachers and our principals that has been opened up to the public for review for at least a month, because we're always going to be transparent. We will listen to our community and our parents. We'll bring that to our board members. We'll make changes as we feel like we need to, and then we will approve a curriculum to move forward going into next year. I want to also reiterate that these are normal board policies. We have adopted in the last 2 years a reading curriculum in kindergarten through 8th grade, a math curriculum in K-8, a phonics curriculum in K-5, a cursive handwriting curriculum in K-5, and a social emotional learning curriculum for K-12. Every one of these curriculum we have advertised through our Facebook page and the web page to make people aware that they were in our boardroom for review so that people could come in, read through them, leave feedback, and then that feedback has been given to our board members before we voted on approving any curriculum. Because that is part of policy 3210, which is parental inspection of and objection to instructional materials. If you want to read more about what your rights are as community members and parents, it's right there in our board policy manual, please do. As always, Clay County Schools, we believe that we are partners with our community. We're not here to tell people what to do. We're here to work with you. Now, 80% of our funding comes from state government. That's how we pay our teachers. So I need everyone to be aware that, at least from me, you will never hear me sit up here and say that we are not going to teach the state standards, because I believe in paying teachers. And it costs a tremendous amount of money to do that. But remember, we create our curriculum. Okay? We create our assessments. Currently, there are no state assessments for social studies. So that gives us leeway in how we think social studies ought to be taught and what we feel like fits our community. So I would ask that, again, the community work with us, give us time to study these standards, let the state sort things out. State Superintendent Truitt has asked the state board to allow her to present a different way to build these standards that is less conceptual and more related to fact, and they have granted that wish. She's supposed to present that in August to the State Board of Education. There has been a bill presented in the North Carolina House and the North Carolina Senate in the last 2 months. I don't think this is finished yet, so that's where we're going to be with our implementation plan moving forward. We're not ready to implement these new standards, so we're going to be using the old standards until at least later on in the spring. Are there any questions from the board members on that report? Questions or comments for Mr. Cole?
Mr. Cole, I just have one question here. With our curriculum, I know we've stated that we would like to share that with parents and stuff, like we did our math reading and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And would we do the similar thing, that we would place it here in a public area where they can come in and review this material?
That is correct. We're actually planning to share it 2 ways. Mr. Overland and I spoke about this the other day, and we'll be meeting with our social studies department about this, but most of their curriculum is already built. So we're going to be studying these new changes and seeing where things happen at the state level, and thinking about some new activities. But ultimately, before we make any changes to our curriculum, we'll be sharing it with the public in a hard copy form, and we'll also have it in a digital form that we'll place on our website so that people can go in and view it and comment either in here with no cards dropped in the box, or they can comment online. And then we'll take that feedback and we'll work on it.
Thank you for that report. Thank you. So next we'll move into the action section of the agenda. Of course, the first action item is the recommendation for approval of a masking policy that will be in effect August 1st.
Thank you. Members of the board, I put together another just short presentation here to give you some more information before you vote on the decision. So I wanted to make sure that, and of course I've shared this with you prior to the meeting, but Yes.
Apology, I'm sorry. I know it's kind of awkward with him talking, but these slides are on the screen in the back. So if you want to kind of turn halfway and see, or if you just want to listen, but I thought I would point that out that they are up if you'd like to read or listen.
So first of all, I've provided just the links to the reference documents from the Strong Schools North Carolina Public Health Toolkit that was just recently updated based on the governor's announcement that his current executive order, when it expires July 30th, beginning August 1st, all of the guidance having to do with COVID-19 will become a local Board of Education decision. So the verbiage that changed is, things changed from shall to should, which in legal terms is a very important distinction. So when it says shall, we have to do it. When it should, then it becomes our decision as to whether we do it or not. These are links to also to the CDC, updated CDC guidance, and the American Academy of Pediatrics guidance. So I wanted to provide that. Specific to state recommendations to masks, I've included all schools should, and I know you guys can't read that, all schools should require all children and staff in schools K through 8th grade to wear face coverings consistently when indoors. Per CDC's order, they should require passengers and staff to wear a face covering on buses, vans, and other group school transportation. They should ensure that face coverings are worn indoors by all individuals who are not fully vaccinated, including students grades 9 through 12, workers, teachers, guests, other adults, and children age 2 or older, unless an exception applies, which the exceptions are listed in the Strong Schools Toolkit. They should share guidance and information about these guidelines, and they should provide masks to those students who need them. Recommendations specific to testing for COVID-19. All schools should refer individuals to diagnostic testing who have symptoms of COVID-19 or disclose recent known close contact to a person with COVID-19. They should offer free rapid antigen testing on site at school to facilitate quick COVID-19 diagnosis. Inform school staff of what students may be able to stay in school, and inform the need for quarantine of close contacts. They should incorporate a screening testing strategy consistent with CDC recommendations as in the table below. I took some input from our school nurses as well as the Clay County Health Department. I asked them what they thought about the new guidance because, as I've said before, I am not a public health person. I am not trained in that way. I've learned a lot in the last 2 years about public health, but that is not my training. So I tend to lean on our health department and our school nurses. Their recommendation was to continue following DHHS and CDC guidance by requiring masks in grades K through 8 for staff and students, as the data shows it has served us well in the last year and a half. They also mentioned that if we have a positive case in a classroom, all those wearing masks will no longer be required to quarantine, which would improve attendance for face-to-face instruction. They said that according to Clay County Health Department data, that only 35% of Clay County is vaccinated, and only 1% of 12 to 17-year-olds are vaccinated. We also put a survey in the field for our staff because we wanted to hear what they thought we should do. That survey closed today, and there was really just one question. Do you feel masks should be required for all staff and students while indoors beginning August 23rd when students return? We had 118 responses from our staff, and 83.9% of them responded no, that they did not feel that we should require masks.
Good.
Do you know if it was different for elementary versus high school?
The percentage was, I actually looked specifically at the primary school, and the percentage this morning at 8:30 was 82% no at the primary school. And obviously, I expected that there might be a little more concern at the primary school just because none of the kids 12 and under have been vaccinated. but really the numbers were basically the same. So my recommendation, after looking at all of this, the board can and should elect at any time to change its decision to make the schools safer in reaction to COVID spread as needed. When I checked on Friday, there were 10 active cases of COVID-19 in Clay County. That is an extremely, extremely small percentage. Obviously, when the school is open, that could change. I hope not. But this board has the authority to do whatever it needs to keep our schools and our students safe. So no matter what the board decides tonight, you can always change that as needed if the data shows we need to later. I feel that we must balance the dangers of COVID spread against the educational needs for our students and use this delegated freedom from the state to choose wisely. I recommend that we do not require masks in order to attend school. However, we will allow mask wearing by parent choice. So that would be my recommendation to the board, but obviously it is a board decision how we move forward. With that decision, if the board elects to go in that direction, we are required to provide a remote option for parents that do not feel it is safe for students to come to school if we're not going to be requiring masks. So if the board approves my recommendation not to require masks, out of respect, we will put that in place. Remote instruction will be provided in grades K through 12, but it will be through a third-party company. It will not be provided by our teachers. So we will pay a third-party company to provide that online instruction because I honestly do not think our teachers can do that for another year, providing it both ways. So I think that, we called on them to meet a specific need, and I am extremely proud of our staff and the work that they put in to provide instruction in multiple different ways for face-to-face students, fully online students that had internet, fully remote students that did not have internet. I mean, it was just, it was an extreme amount of work, and I'm so very proud of them, but I do not feel it is fair to ask them to do that again. Those parents that want remote instruction for their child should inform the principal of their child's school by August 18th so that we can have the time to get them set up with classes. And last is just the decision options to consider for this board. One, you could vote to make masking a parent option for grades K through 12. Two, you could require all staff and students to wear masks while indoors in K-12 due to the fact that we do share buses, we share the cafeteria, and our kids are with each other all the time on our small campus because they're all here together. Or third, you could require all pre-K through 8 staff and students to wear masks while indoors because of the lack of vaccinations 12 under, and require all unvaccinated staff and students to wear masks in grades 9 through 12. Just remember that we have no way of proving who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. We have no way to track that, so that would be a purely honor system thing. And that's my presentation on that.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. I know this masking thing has been something that's been on everybody's mind a lot lately. Lots of thought and consideration. You've heard Mr. Cole's presentation. So any discussion or comments? If not, then I will entertain a motion in regards to the masking decision.
I'd like to make a motion that we select option number 1.
So we have a motion from Ms. Beck that we consider option number 1, making masking a parent option for grades pre-K through 12.
Following carefully his recommendation that we change it if needed, or and also permitting any student or teacher who wishes to wear a mask to do so.
So we have that motion from Ms. Beck. Any comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a Second. Second. Mr. Jones, second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next, we have recommendation for an approval grant application for providing on-site COVID testing.
Interestingly enough, the next item relates directly to the decision that you just made. So the county received some federal funding for to limit COVID-19 and to reduce loss of learning. The school system received some, well, the state received some as well. And one of the ways that the state has decided to use their federal funding for COVID is to provide grants to schools that would like to do their own COVID testing in-house. What this grant would provide for Clay County schools is about $100,000. At first, it was for 1 year. I've heard discussion now that it may be for 2 years, but for now, we're gonna hold it to 1. But what this would do is it would connect us to a state vendor that would provide us with inventory of quick tests for COVID-19, as well as a state vendor that if we had students that tested positive with the quick test, we could then send their test for more in-depth testing to the state vendor. You probably saw some of this mentioned in the masking information from CDC and the state level. This would also pay for a position for either an additional nurse or a nurse's assistant that could help us just kind of track all of it, because it's quite a bit of work to track testing for 1,250 students. I'm recommending to the board that you approve us applying for this grant. If we receive it, that will allow us to post a position to help us kind of manage all of this and do the clerical work, but also providing our COVID-19 testing as needed in-house. As things currently are, if a student is sick, we have to ask their parent to take them to the health department or to Walgreens and then hopefully let us know. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. It's just really hard for us to manage it, and that's the reason why we pretty much had to just quarantine the whole classroom, because we just didn't know. This would allow us to kind of do that in-house. Now, this would still be subject to parent option. If they didn't want their kids tested, they wouldn't have to. But for those parents that were okay with it, it would just allow us to keep it in-house and hopefully quarantine fewer students than we've had to in the past. So I think that's a good thing. What we want to do is maximize face-to-face instructional time and have fewer quarantines from school. And this would help us do that. So I recommend that you allow us to apply for this grant and see what happens.
Okay, so you've heard Mr. Cole's recommendation about applying for a grant to provide on-site COVID testing. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve.
Make a motion, we approve to apply for this grant.
Mr. Jones makes a motion. Second. Mr. Caldwell, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next action item is the approval of the Clay County School Student Code of Conduct. I know we had that emailed to us. We had a chance to look over that for a little over a month now. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Cole?
So this is just an update to our student code of conduct and policy. Obviously, we wanted to get this in place before the students came back. It's really the same things that we've always done. What it does do is just split up behaviors into 5 different levels to give our principals a little more direction on what consequences they can assign to a student based on the seriousness of the behavior exhibited. So just for an example, level 1 behaviors generally should result in in-school interventions, such as in-school suspension or a parent conference or a student-teacher conference, student-principal conference. Any other aggravating factors, if they are present, then the principal can go beyond that if they want, but it just gives them direction. Level 5 behaviors, they allow for expulsion of a student as provided by state law for a violation if the student is 14 years of age or older and the student's behavior indicates that his or her continued presence in school constitute a clear threat to the safety of other students or employees, and the board determines that there is no appropriate alternative education program. So obviously that would be reserved for the most serious offenses. It still allows principals the flexibility to move up and down this scale as they see the need, but it just gives them some additional guidelines as far as what consequences that the board feels would be appropriate in general without any mitigating factors.
Very good. So we've had that for a while, so I'll entertain a motion that there's no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the code of conduct.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Ms. Crawford. Mr. Caldwell, second. All in favor? Thank you. Next, we have a recommendation for a retention stipend for district director. Stipend would be $600 out of local budget funds, correct?
That's correct. Members of the board, you'll recall that one of the uses of our ESSER funds was to pay a retention bonus to our staff for remaining with us in Clay County to be paid out in the September paychecks. All certified staff would receive $600 apiece for a retention bonus. All of our classified full-time staff would receive a $300 bonus, and our classified part-time staff would receive a $150 bonus. It has been a tough year. Certainly a lot of people have retired, I think, as a direct result. And we felt like this would be a good use, and it's an allowable use of our federal funds to reward our folks that have decided to remain with us. One exception to this was our district office directors. We were, based on the rules of the federal money, we were able to include some of our directors, such as our technology director, our child nutrition director, but we were not able to include our exceptional children's director, our accountability director, and our finance director. And I think that it's only fair that we treat them just like we do the rest of our certified staff. We just can't use federal dollars to do it. So I'm just asking that the board approve providing a $600 bonus to those 3 directors out of our local funds, just in the interest of fairness. So that would leave the one employee of our school system that would not get a retention bonus would be the superintendent, and I think that's fair. So.
Good. Three employees.
3 employees, yes, sir.
I guess you've heard the recommendation for the approval of a retention stipend for all the district directors.
I make the motion that we approve this.
Mr. Jones makes a motion.
I'll second it.
Ms. Beck, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we have the approval of proposed aviation fund agreement with the Western North Carolina Youth Aviation Foundation. Again, you've been emailed that. Richard Swartz, our board attorney, has been working on that. So this is Mr. Swartz's final draft, I guess, as long as the Western North Carolina Aviation Group agrees to this.
Yes, so this MOU, Mr. Schwartz, your attorney, has been working on as we work with the Western Carolina Youth Aviation Foundation to just determine the guidelines of our partnership and how to use the aviation funds that are currently lodged at Hazel High School. This is, I guess, what Mr. Schwartz would like us to do, but we are negotiating with another group. So he is asking that we approve this iteration of the agreement so that we can then share that with their lawyer and with them. And there's a good chance that they may make some suggestions about some possible changes, and we'll just have to negotiate that out. But it starts with your approval of this proposed agreement.
Any questions or comments about that proposal? If not, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the proposed aviation fund agreement with the Western North Carolina Youth Aviation Foundation. Mr. Caldwell.
I second it.
Ms. Crawford, all in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have our dairy vendor. If you want to And Ms. Judy Best.
This is all the money stuff. Yes, every year annually, we host our, for bid, our dairy that we'll use for Clay County Schools for the year. This is typically somewhere around a $60,000 to $65,000 contract. This year, last year we used a different group than we would like to use this upcoming year. Mayfield Dairy Farms actually submitted the winning bid, and we just need approval from the board of that bid so that we can move forward.
So you've heard a recommendation to approve Mayfield Dairy Farms as the vendor for Clay County Schools. So
Make a motion that we accept.
Mr. Jones, Ms. Beck, second. All in favor? Thank you. Next, we have an update to policy 7500, which is workday and overtime policy.
Yes, I have provided this in your packet. There's just a small change. This is something that our current policy states that our work week goes from 12 a.m. Saturday until 11:59 p.m. Friday. We actually have, we need to change that to the official work week being 12 a.m. Monday to 11:59 p.m. Sunday. That is the only change to this policy, but we do need the policy to reflect that so that when we're calculating leave and pay, that we're using the correct time.
So you've heard that recommendation to change policy 7500. Motion. Motion. Mr. Caldwell.
I'll second it.
Ms. Beck, all in favor? Next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Remember, any of those items can be pulled out and discussed separately if need be. Those are all meetings, minute meetings that have been emailed to you ahead of time, and then there's a list of policies for first read that will be up in August. So I'll entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Second, Mr. Jones, second. All in favor? Thank you. Next, I will entertain a motion that we go into closed session to discuss personnel and negotiations.
Make a motion, we go into closed session.
Mr. Jones?
I'll second that.
Brett, second. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate your time and your comments.